When her luxury Porsche broke down on a deserted Colorado highway, she thought the flat tire was her biggest problem, until a stranger appeared and changed her life forever. The heat shimmered on the blacktop, distorting the horizon into a wavering mirage. Sienna Taylor leaned against the hood of her Porsche, sunglasses sliding down the bridge of her nose, sweat gathering at her hairline. 30 minutes outside of Grand Junction and her world had shrunk to a strip of highway, a shredded rear tire, and the occasional vulture circling overhead. No cell service, no passing cars, just silence and the steady tick of her cooling engine. She had been stranded long enough to start hating the sight of every cactus and sagebrush in reach. A crunch of gravel broke the stillness. She straightened, hand tightening around her clutch as a figure appeared up the rise. A boy, no, a young man, 19 at most, tall and wiry, with rolled-up sleeves clinging to arms browned by sun. A battered backpack hung off one shoulder, laces from his boots dragging in the dust. He slowed when he spotted the Porsche, then her. His eyes, a clear, steady brown, squinted against the glare. "You look like you've been out here all day," he said, voice carrying the quiet ease of someone used to wide-open spaces. She almost laughed. "I've been here long enough to hate every cactus in a 5-mile radius." He chuckled, low and genuine, the kind of laugh that made the air feel less hostile. "Mind if I take a look?" Her instincts fluttered. This was still a stranger on an empty road, but what choices did she have? The nearest gas station was 3 miles behind, and she had already blistered her feet walking half a mile before giving up. His gaze was calm, unbothered by her expensive sunglasses or the gleaming logo on her car. She hesitated only a moment, then nodded. He dropped his pack in the dirt, unzipped it, and then pulled out a pair of worn work gloves and a compact toolkit that looked as if it had been passed down through generations. Without waiting for her to guide him, he crouched by the tire, already loosening the bolts with practiced precision. "You've got a spare?" he asked, not looking up. "In the back, I think." He popped the trunk with a smooth motion, retrieved the spare, and got to work. His movements were economical, rhythmic, no wasted effort, no fumbling. Sienna folded her arms and leaned against the car, watching. The sun reflected off his damp curls, stuck to his temple as he tightened bolts in a steady cadence. She felt oddly mesmerized. "You do this often?" she asked. "Sometimes. My uncle owned a shop in town. Taught me everything before he passed." His voice faltered just a fraction at the word passed, but he didn't look up, didn't invite pity. That silenced her. She shifted her weight, suddenly more aware of her polished heels sinking into the gravel, the expensive fabric of her blouse clinging in the heat. He finished the last turn of the wrench, stood, and wiped his hands on faded jeans. "You're all set," he said simply. She reached for her wallet without thinking, sliding it halfway out of her clutch. "Let me—" He raised a hand, shaking his head, stepping back. "No need, ma'am. I'm just glad I came down this road today." Her fingers froze on the leather. She stared at him, more stunned by his refusal than she had been by the tire blowing out. "You don't want anything?" "I've got what I need." He slung the pack over one shoulder, eyes meeting hers briefly. A small nod, then he turned, walking up the hill, his shadow stretching long across the broken asphalt. Sienna stood rooted beside the car, heart unexpectedly unsteady. She had seen countless faces in boardrooms, on magazine covers, at parties where every word was a transaction. Yet this boy, this stranger, had given her help, skill, and dignity, and walked away without a trace of expectation. She slid into the driver's seat, the leather hot beneath her, but her mind wasn't on the road ahead. It lingered on the calluses on his hands, the quiet strength in his voice, and the simplicity of his answer, "I've got what I need." She didn't know why, but as the Porsche hummed back to life and carried her toward the city, she already understood one thing. For the first time in weeks, her thoughts weren't on the company that had betrayed her, or the boardroom that had cast her aside. They were on him, on Jalen Brooks. And that unsettled her more than the flat tire ever had. The Colorado sun was softer this time, dipping toward late afternoon as Sienna Taylor steered her Porsche down the same lonely road. The stretch of asphalt where she'd been stranded still bore faint black marks from her blown tire, but the real scar was in her mind. She could not forget the boy, the way he'd refused her money, the way his voice had held steady when he said he had what he needed. It haunted her, not because it was mysterious, but because it was so unfamiliar. In her world, everyone wanted something, a contract, a check, a headline. He had walked away with nothing but dust on his boots. She told herself it was ridiculous, this detour. She had business in Denver. Calls to return, lawyers to pacify. Yet her hands had guided the wheel back toward Grand Junction as if pulled by instinct. Her chest tightened with the absurdity of it. Sienna Taylor, youngest female CEO in the clean energy sector until 3 weeks ago, chasing down a boy who patched tires. At the edge of town, she slowed. Rows of battered mailboxes leaned under the weight of years, a sagging fence split by weather and wind. Beyond it, a ladder wobbled against a porch. There he was, Jalen, hammer in hand, shirt damp with sweat, curls dusted in sawdust. He balanced with the agility of someone who trusted his own body more than the world around him. An elderly woman shaded her eyes from the porch below, calling instructions he already seemed to know. Sienna parked at the curb, heart racing though she had no reason to be nervous. She stepped out, her designer flats crunching on gravel, and the woman's voice rose. "You got company, hun." Jalen turned, blinking in surprise when he saw her. For a beat, he didn't move. Then that cautious smile tugged at his mouth. "Miss Taylor." "I was in the neighborhood," she lied, the words awkward and hollow even to her own ears. He descended the ladder slowly, as though unsure if she was real or an illusion born of heat and exhaustion. When his boots hit the dirt, he wiped his hands on his jeans and nodded politely. "Everything okay with the tire?" "Perfect," she said, perhaps too quickly. She hesitated, searching for ground that didn't make her sound desperate. "But I never got to say thank you properly." "You already did," he replied simply, as if gratitude wasn't a currency that needed repeating. Her gaze shifted to the nails, the sagging porch, the bent ladder. He didn't just fix cars, he fixed lives that had no insurance policy. "You do this a lot?" she asked. "Sometimes people need help. I like using my hands." Wind brushed through the cedar trees. Dust hung thick in the air, carrying the scent of wood and sweat. Something unspoken lingered between them. Recognition maybe, or respect, or something deeper neither dared name. Sienna reached into her car, pulled out a chilled bottle of water and extended it. Their fingers brushed as he took it, and she didn't look away this time. "Thanks," he said, unscrewing the cap and taking a long sip. Her pulse quickened. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with possibility. "I don't suppose you like coffee?" The first real smile broke across his face, slow but warm. "Depends who's asking." She matched it with one of her own, smaller but no less real. "Someone who's not done driving this road yet." Later, they sat in a corner booth of a cafe that smelled of fried potatoes and burnt coffee. Locals swapped stories at chipped formica tables, oblivious to the millionaire in designer jeans across from the dusty boy with calloused hands. Jalen stirred sugar into his cup, studying her carefully. "So why are you really here?" he asked finally. She inhaled, eyes flicking to the window. "Honestly, I don't know. I was driving and I ended up here again." "You're not used to being curious without a reason, are you?" Her lips tightened. "I'm not used to someone walking away from me." That made him pause, his spoon hovering above the cup. He set it down. "People like me don't usually get asked to stay." Something cracked inside her chest. She leaned forward, voice dropping. "Then maybe that's why I'm here. To ask you to." Jalen looked down, fingers drumming the table once, twice. He thought of the home where nothing stayed fixed, where his aunt had patched holes in the roof with duct tape, where his mother had left without goodbye. He thought of the boy he'd been, unwanted, unnoticed, Steve, and the man he was trying to become. When he looked up again, her eyes were waiting, steady, unwavering. A spark passed between them, subtle, yet undeniable. The waitress dropped off their refills, jolting the moment back into the present. But the seed had been planted. Neither of them could pretend it hadn't. As dusk fell outside the cafe window, the suspense deepened, not of danger, but of something riskier, the possibility of two lives colliding in ways neither had planned. The Carrington estate shimmered like something lifted out of a magazine spread, 3 stories of glass and steel rising from the aspen foothills, every hedge sculpted, every flower bed manicured as though nature itself worked under contract. Dozens of imported cars lined the circular driveway, their polished chrome flashing under chandelier-bright security lights. Laughter and music drifted through the wide double doors, spilling out onto the marble steps. Sienna adjusted the sleeve of her black dress and glanced at the man beside her. Jalen's posture was rigid, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of a button-down shirt she had insisted he borrow. It was pressed, clean, but it didn't disguise the dust still caught under his fingernails. His work boots scuffed the gleaming stone like a rebellion. He stood at the threshold as though the house itself were daring him to enter. You sure you want to do this? She asked quietly. His jaw tightened. I'm just here for the food. She laughed softly, but even that laugh felt fragile. When she pushed open the heavy brass handles, warm light and murmured conversations washed over them. Guests in sequined gowns and tailored tuxedos turned, curiosity flashing like camera shutters. Every eye traveled from her familiar face, the disgraced darling of Colorado Tech, to the boy at her side. A man in his 50s approached first, smile wide, eyes sharper than the edge of his cufflinks. Sienna, he said, lingering over her name like a toast. Finally, we thought you weren't coming. His gaze flicked briefly toward Jalen, then back to her with a calculated pause. And you brought a guest. This is Jalen Brooks, she said firmly. He's helping me with a new project. The man did not extend his hand. Charmed, he muttered, already turning back to his glass. The warmth of the room dimmed a degree. Sienna's smile faltered, but she pressed forward, weaving into conversations with the ease of someone trained since birth to survive these rooms. Jalen drifted toward the edges, away from the chandeliers and practiced laughter. He lingered near a long table of hors d'oeuvres, choosing a cracker over some nameless delicacy skewered on a silver toothpick. He didn't belong here, and the air knew it. You're not from around here, are you? The voice came from his left, slick and amused. Jalen Turr. Ned to find a man in his 30s, blazer perfectly cut, drink in hand, smirk nailed in place. Excuse me? Relax, the man said, just making conversation. Sienna has a habit of projects. Jalen's jaw tensed. She didn't bring home a project. Easy, the man said with mock innocence. I'm just saying, dogs, startups, strangers, it's sort of her thing. Before Jalen could reply, another voice cut in, softer but sharp as glass. Is there a problem here? Sienna. The man straightened at once, but not enough to hide his smirk. No problem, just chatting with your friend here. Then find someone else to chat with. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The man slipped away, muttering into his drink, leaving Jalen seething in silence. He turned to her, his voice low and unsteady. That's what this is to them. A show. A charity case. He's a jerk, she said quickly. Yeah, Jalen said, but he's not the only one staring. They don't matter. They matter to you, he said quietly. And I don't. The words landed like a hammer. For a moment she couldn't answer. He stepped away, pushing through the side door out onto the terrace. The night air hit him cold and sharp, a confession of its own. He braced against the railing, staring out at miles of darkness, pinpricks of light scattered like another world far below. A few seconds later, the door clicked open again. I didn't think it would be like this, Sienna said, stepping into the chill. He didn't look at her. Didn't think I'd be on display. I wanted you here. Yeah? Or did you want to feel better about yourself? Her silence cut deeper than anger. When she finally spoke, her voice was brittle. You think I don't see it too? The way they look at me since the board forced me out? Like I'm broken, like I lost my edge. Maybe I brought you here because I wanted them to see something good I found outside their world. He turned, eyes dark. Turns out, I don't want to be seen at all. Her chest tightened. She stepped closer, desperate now. I'm not here to hurt you, Jalen. Then don't parade me. The words hit harder than anything else tonight. He stood inches away, the hum of distant music seeping through the glass behind them. For the first time, Sienna saw the wall in his eyes, not against her, but against everything he had survived to stand here tonight. You don't know what it's like, he said quietly, to walk into a room and wait to be called the mistake. She exhaled. Maybe not, but I know what it's like to walk into a room and not recognize yourself anymore. For a long moment, the distance between them didn't feel like money, or race, or history. It felt like two people trying not to drown. I should go, he said finally, steady but raw. Her eyes glassed over, but she nodded. Okay. He brushed past her, paused on the threshold, and spoke without turning back. It wasn't the food. I came for you. Then he disappeared into the night. And for the first time, Sienna wondered if her greatest mistake wasn't losing her company, it was losing him. The afternoon heat clung heavy over Thompson Hardware, the kind of small-town store where the air smelled of cut lumber, oil, and the metallic tang of nails. Outside, sawdust flows, aided like dust motes through beams of sun that spilled across a half-assembled shed. Jalen stood there, shoulders hunched, hands buried deep in a box of bolts. He pretended not to notice the hum of the Porsche engine rolling into the gravel lot behind him, but his jaw tightened. He already knew the sound. He already knew who it was. Sienna stepped out of the car, trading polished heels for scuffed boots this time. her hair pulled back tight as though she were bracing for battle. She took slow steps toward him, her presence out of place against the stacks of plywood and rust-stained wheelbarrows. He kept his focus on the bolts, refusing to look up. "You lost again?" he asked, voice dry, sharp, but not cruel. "I was in the area," she said, forcing steadiness into her tone. He snorted. "You rich folks always in the area when you want something." She stopped just short of the workbench, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the smudges of sawdust on his shirt. "I'm not here for a fight." "Good," he muttered, finally glancing at her. "I'm tired of those." Her chest tightened. The words were simple, but she heard the weight behind them, years of battles he never chose. She exhaled. "I wanted to say I'm sorry." That caught him, his hands stilled on the bolts. He looked at her, suspicion and something softer flickering across his face. "For what?" "For thinking you'd enjoy being a curiosity in my world, for putting you there, and for not stopping that night when you clearly wanted to leave." Jalen sighed, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked older in that moment than 19, shoulders heavy with a life already carved deep. It wasn't about leaving, it was about being seen the wrong way. Sienna followed his gaze to the horizon, where the sky stretched wide, open, and unyielding. "I brought you into my space," she said softly, "but I never gave you room to breathe." Finally, he turned fully to her. His voice was low, steady, but guarded. "Why do you care so much?" Her throat tightened. She hadn't planned to say it aloud, but the truth broke free, ragged and real. "Because you're the first person in years who looked at me without expectation or judgment. You just saw me." That silenced him. For once, he had no quick reply. "And when I lost everything," she continued, voice cracking now, "when I couldn't walk into my own boardroom without whispers, when I realized money doesn't buy loyalty, you were the one who reminded me I still had worth." The words hung heavy between them. Jalen folded his arms, still cautious. "So now I'm your emotional crutch?" She shook her head quickly. "No, you're my mirror, the only honest thing left in my life." A breeze stirred the dust at their feet. Somewhere behind them, a table saw whined to life, shrill and distant. She reached into her bag and pulled out the leather-bound notebook she had shown him once before. Its edges were worn now, corners bent, pages swollen with ink and sketches. She held it out with both hands, like an offering. "I kept working on it," she said. "The community workshop idea, mentorship, vocational training. It's not a pitch, it's real. And I don't want to do it without you." Jalen took the notebook slowly, thumbing through the pages. Blueprints, handwritten notes, clumsy drawings of classrooms, benches, tools. Her vision, scrawled in ink. He didn't speak, but his silence was weighty, considering. "You don't have to say yes," she added quickly, nerves flooding her chest. "But I need you to know, I meant every word." He closed the note on T-book carefully, his thumb brushing the spine. He studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away but couldn't. "Why me?" he asked quietly. Her eyes filled, though she didn't let the tears fall. "Because you don't need to be rich to be extraordinary." For the first time since the gala, he let himself really see her. Not the millionaire in heels, not the disgraced CEO, just Sienna, the woman who kept showing up, no matter how many times he tried to push her away. He nodded once, a single decisive movement. "All right, I'll help you build it, but on one condition." Her breath caught. "What?" "You stop apologizing for loving something real." Her lips parted, trembling into a laugh that was half relief, half disbelief. "Deal." Later that week, they sat side by side on the tailgate of his old pickup at the edge of the lot. Plans were spread between them, coffee in hand, dusk sinking into the mountains. He pointed at one of her blueprints. "You drew this electrical setup backwards." She frowned, squinting. "No, I didn't." He arched a brow. She sighed. "Fine, maybe I did. You're lucky I'm patient." "I'm lucky for a lot of things lately," she said softly. The moment lingered, warm and fragile, until his voice broke it. "They're going to come after you again, you know. The board, the press. They'll call this a vanity project. They'll say you're throwing money at a boy you barely know." She met his gaze, steady. "Let them." He studied her a long moment, then nodded slowly. For the first time, he didn't see her as a woman out of place in his world. He saw her as someone who chose to be here. And beneath the sawdust sky of Colorado, something new took root between them. Not pity, not charity, but the dangerous beginnings of trust. The Denver Civic Convention Center gleamed like a fortress of glass and steel, its panels catching the afternoon sun until the whole building shimmered as if wrapped in armor. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Rows upon rows of suited investors, journalists, and startup hopefuls buzzed with anticipation, their voices rising like a swarm of restless bees. The stage was framed by LED screens that pulsed with sponsor logos and scrolling names of the day's keynote speakers. Cameras lined the aisles, lenses hungry, waiting to dissect every move, every stumble, every word. Backstage, Sienna Taylor stood still, palms damp, her blazer a sharp cut of matte black that looked almost militant. The hum of the crowd pressed against her chest like a weight. Her assistant fussed nearby, adjusting the mic clipped to her lapel, whispering anxieties. "You don't have to do this, Sienna. Play it safe. They're expecting projections, strategy, reassurance. You can win some of them back if you just—" Sienna cut her off with a single look. Her eyes were steady, even if her heart thundered. "No," she said firmly. "They need to see it. All of it." And when her name was announced, the polite applause that rose from the audience was tinged with curiosity, skepticism. The disgraced CEO, the boardroom exile, the heiress who'd been voted out of her own father's empire. She stepped into the blinding lights, her heels echoing across the stage. For a moment, the brightness swallowed her, but she did not flinch. She placed her hands on the podium, glanced down at the neat stack of prepared notes, and pushed them aside. The murmur started instantly, rippling through the room like wind through dry leaves. Investors stiffened. Journalists leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. Sienna took a breath that seemed to echo across the cavernous hall. "I'm not here," she began, her voice firm, "to talk about equity market projections, or IPOs, or exit strategies." A pause. Confusion shifted into tension. "I'm here to talk about what happens when we lose sight of people in pursuit of profit, when we trade integrity for influence, when we silence the voices that don't wear suits." The murmurs grew sharper now, fragmented whispers spreading like cracks in glass. Sienna pressed forward, her voice rising with conviction. "You all know I left Carrington Green. What you don't know is why." Behind her, the massive screen flickered. Instead of charts or revenue slides, an image filled the wall. A workbench littered with tools, hands steady on wood, sawdust caught in sunlight. The audience stilled, bewildered. "I left because the people I worked with stopped listening," Sienna said. "They stopped believing that innovation can come from unexpected places, from people you overlook." Her throat tightened, but she pressed on. "Last month, I brought a young man, Jalen Brooks, to one of your events. You probably read the articles, the comments, the assumptions. You saw what you wanted to see." She turned slightly, her gaze lifting as if searching the shadows at the back of the room. "But what none of you saw was what I saw. A builder, a teacher, a man with more wisdom than some of the executives I sat beside for 10 years. Now the silence was suffocating. Phones hovered in midair. Investors leaned forward in disbelief. Her voice softened, but every syllable carried like a bell. "I love him." Gasps cracked through the room. A glass clinked against the floor. Someone in the front row audibly cursed. And then the cameras exploded, shutters snapping like machine guns, journalists whispering furiously into their recorders. "And if that costs me your funding, your respect, or your invitation to next year's keynote," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips, "so be it. Because I'd rather build something honest with him than keep pretending with any of you." She stepped away from the podium. The applause never came. The room fractured into chaos, phones raised, hands pointing, whispers igniting like wildfire. She didn't wait for any of it. She walked off stage with her head high, every click of her heels a defiance. Backstage, her assistant was pale, clutching a tablet lit with a flood of incoming headlines. "Sienna, the press, they're already writing, it's everywhere, it's—" "Let them," she said calmly, unclipping her mic. "For once, I gave them something worth writing." A few feet down the corridor, Jalen stood frozen, his borrowed blazer stiff across his broad shoulders, his boots out of place against the polished marble. He had made his way inside just as her voice carried that impossible declaration. His expression was unreadable, shock, disbelief, something heavier beneath. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly when she reached him. "I know." She stopped before him, searching his eyes, her voice trembling now only because the truth had been freed. "But I wanted to. I couldn't let them write our story for me. I'd rather lose everything with intention." The storm of voices from the auditorium raged behind them, but here, in this narrow hallway, time slowed. Jalen's gaze dropped, his lips parting as if to speak, but he said nothing at first. When he finally looked at her again, his eyes were heavy but alive, filled with something he had long buried. "You meant it?" he asked. "All of it?" She stepped closer, the chaos fading into nothing. Every word. They stood inches apart, suspended in the quiet heartbeat before a choice. And then he whispered, steady and certain, "Then I'm staying." Her eyes closed, just for a breath, and when they opened, the relief was raw, glistening. Good. That night, the internet burned. Headlines screamed across every screen. Sienna Taylor declares love for unknown builder at tech summit. CEO walks away from fortune for boy with dirt under his nails. The backlash came like a tidal wave, investors pulling out, former board members issuing stiff statements, journalists dissecting her speech with scalpel precision. But amid the outrage, something else rose too. Emails, letters, handwritten notes from teachers, veterans, welders, grandmothers. Stories of being overlooked, unseen, dismissed. Stories of hope sparked by one woman who stood on a stage and chose honesty over empire. And in the middle of it all, Sienna sat under a sky swollen with stars, reading one letter aloud to Jalen. It was from a 12-year-old girl in Detroit. "My brother says I can't build things because I'm a girl, but you showed them. You built something brave." Jalen leaned back on the porch rail, arms crossed, eyes searching the heavens. He didn't smile, not fully, but his voice was low and certain. "She gets it." Sienna's throat tightened. She whispered, "Yeah, she does." For the first time in years, Jalen felt something stirring in his chest that was more dangerous and more powerful than anger. It was the thing he had given up on long ago. Hope. The morning sun spilled across the foothills like liquid gold, washing the valley in a light that seemed almost too pure to belong to the same world that had once mocked them. Where an abandoned warehouse had sat a year before, its windows cracked, its walls sagging, its lot strewn with rusted scrap, now stood a building reborn. Clean lines of pine wood and corrugated steel caught the dawn. Wide windows gleamed with etched words that announced themselves proudly to anyone who passed. Brooks Taylor Institute. Skills. Dignity. Future. Inside, the scent of sawdust and fresh paint mingled with the sweeter aroma of cinnamon rolls, donated that morning by a local bakery. Rows of benches stretched across the bright workshop floor, every surface alive with the sound of hammers, drills, laughter. Teenagers, veterans, single mothers, young men once written off by courts or schools, all leaned over projects, measuring, sanding, creating. The clatter wasn't chaos, it was music. Jalen Brooks stood at the head of a table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a dark blue work shirt flecked with chalk dust. A group of students crowded close as he demonstrated a dovetail joint, his voice calm but commanding, his hands steady. For the first time in his life, he wasn't surviving, he was teaching. They watched him not with skepticism, but with admiration. And for the first time, he felt at home in front of a crowd. By the entrance, Sienna greeted donors and community leaders with a warmth that was no longer performative. She wasn't the woman trying to hold her place at the table of men in tailored suits. She was grounded, eyes alight, steady in her own skin. Her phone buzzed endlessly in her purse, calls from reporters, former colleagues, even television producers wanting interviews. But she didn't glance at it once. The old world no longer owned her. Outside, folding chairs filled the lot. Flags fluttered in the breeze, framing a makeshift podium. As the crowd hushed, Jalen stepped up, wiping his palms against his jeans before adjusting the mic. He looked out at the sea of faces, students, neighbors, leaders, strangers, and for a moment the weight of it nearly buckled him. He had grown up in shadows, told in countless ways to stay small. Now, every eye was waiting for his words. "I used to believe," he began, voice low but strong, "that some people were just born to stay small, that no matter how good you were, no matter how hard you worked, there were doors you'd never be invited through." A hush blanketed the crowd. He swallowed, continued. "But then I met someone who didn't just hold the door open for me. She walked out of it herself. She sat beside me. She listened." His gaze shifted to Sienna. Her eyes glistened, her lips pressed tight against trembling. "She didn't hand me a ladder," he went on. "She handed me tools, and together we built something bigger than either of us." He swept a hand toward the building behind him, its windows blazing with reflected sun. "This place isn't just for kids who want to build tables. It's for anyone who's ever been told they don't belong. For the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones with calloused hands who still know how to shape something beautiful out of nothing. This house," he said, pausing, voice steady as stone, "is for the ones like me." Applause erupted, thunderous and raw, but Jalen didn't move. He let the moment breathe, stretching into silence again before he added, softer, "We named it Brooks Taylor. But the truth is, it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the future." The crowd rose, clapping, some wiping tears. Beside the podium, Sienna's hand clutched the railing, her heart pounding so hard it felt like the applause was echoing inside her chest. Later, after the crowd thinned and the laughter inside the workshop dimmed to murmurs, Jalen and Sienna sat together on the back steps of the building. Beyond them, kids chased each other across a field planted with young trees that would one day shade the institute. The sky bled into dusk, painted orange and violet. Sienna leaned her head against his shoulder. "You nailed it," she whispered. He smirked faintly, didn't stutter. "Nope, you just turned every grown man in that audience into a puddle." He laughed, the sound rich but tinged with something deeper. Release, maybe even healing. After a pause, he asked quietly, "You ever miss it? The old world?" She shook her head without hesitation. "Not for a second. I didn't lose power, Jalen. I found a better way to use it." He nodded, thoughtful. "You remember what you said to me after that conference, when everything exploded?" "Which part?" she teased gently. "That loving something real was worth losing everything else." She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with dusk and memory. "Yeah." He took her hand, kissed her knuckles softly, reverently. "You were right." Inside, the building glowed, its windows spilling golden light into the evening, filled with the sounds of hammers, voices, and dreams taking shape. An old pickup truck rolled past slowly. Mrs. Temple, the retired librarian Jalen once fixed a porch for, paused, looking at the wheel. Her eyes filled as she whispered, "They turned a scrapyard into a sanctuary." In the workshop, a boy hesitated over a drill. Jalen crouched beside him, guiding his hands. "Easy pressure, let the tool do the work." The boy looked up. "You ever get scared?" Jalen smiled. "All the time." "So how do you know you're doing the right thing?" He thought for a moment, then answered quietly, "When it feels like you're building something bigger than yourself, and it scares you just enough to mean something, that's how." The bell over the front door jingled. Sienna walked in carrying a small frame. She handed it to him. Inside was a photo of him teaching, taken from behind, sunlight pouring across his shoulders. On the frame, in careful script, were 2 words, "Love builds." He looked at it, then at her, his throat too tight for words. "Where do we hang it?" she asked. He smiled softly. "At the heart." And as dusk sank fully over the valley, the institute glowed like a beacon in the dark, proof that sometimes the most broken roads lead exactly where you were meant to go.